Hey everybody, today I'm in downtown Indianapolis and I'm actually near TCU Amphitheater and White River State Park. White River State Park's actually just off to my west here. And I'm just kind of milling around downtown, obviously shooting this video. And in this video, we're gonna talk not just about White River State Park, but we're gonna talk about some of the questions that I hear most often about Indianapolis. So I do these videos, I'm also a real estate agent. I hear a really good number of questions about Indianapolis. So we're gonna cover 5 of those that I hear fairly often. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time to this channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in Indianapolis or any of the cities and towns that surround Indianapolis, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and also tap that little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video. Now we have people reaching out to us from all over the country with questions about Indianapolis and of course downtown Indianapolis, different places to live in Indianapolis, and a lot of the cities and towns that surround Indy. So if you have questions at all about anything Indianapolis or surrounding Indianapolis, then make sure you reach out any way that you know how. We'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll certainly have your back when it comes time for you to make your move to the Indy Metro. All right, again, I am in really kind of White River State Park here at the entrance. I just parked in the lot right over here next to TCU Amphitheater, and this used to be called the Lawn, and it has come a long way as far as how big it is, how grand it is. They have a big new cover over it. This is one of the coolest places to see an outdoor concert in Indianapolis. The music scene in Indianapolis is actually really quite good when you compare it to a lot of other cities. Definitely fights for its place in being really cool. But the purpose of this video here is that I do get a lot of questions about Indianapolis. So in these videos, in the comments, questions about different parts of Indianapolis, what Indianapolis is like. I mean, you just name it. And then I help a lot of people relocating to Indianapolis or the whole Indy Metro. And some people have never been to Indianapolis before. Well, of course they have questions about it. If they're thinking about moving here and what they read online and what they see online, I mean, is that really how Indianapolis is? So I hear a lot of different questions pretty much on a daily basis about Indy, and over a period of time, I start to see patterns develop. So we're gonna go through some of those really common questions that I hear about Indianapolis. Probably the number one thing that I hear as I'm kind of moving around, they're moving fences around because they've got all kinds of shows coming up here at TCU Amphitheater and just a lot of stuff happening down here at White River State Park. But one of the things that I hear the most is Indianapolis safe. And if you're doing your research online about Indianapolis, you're definitely gonna find that Indianapolis does not have a good safety reputation. It just flat out doesn't. But honestly, I don't know what bigger city, and Indianapolis is a big city. There's 900,000 people, and if you include the entire metro, there's 2 million people here. So it's populated, and people go back and forth about, is it a big city or not? Yeah, it is. It's a big city. And anytime you get into a big city and you get a lot of people together, crowded together, there will absolutely be crime, without a doubt. There's gonna be violent crime, and there's certainly gonna be property crime. Almost without a doubt in every single city that's gonna happen. So Indianapolis is right there in that mix. Now there's some places in Indianapolis that are awful. I mean, there's no way around it. They are really rough places to live. They'd be really rough places to be. And they're exceptionally dangerous places. Where the violent crime really happens, that's what most people are most concerned about. And there are definitely places in Indianapolis where it's pocketed, where you do have some violent crime. But on the other side of that, there are a ton of places in Indianapolis that I would consider living. And some of them are on the fringes of higher crime areas and lower crime areas. So they may be right next to one another, but depending on my stage in life, I may consider living in those. Now, I've lived in Indianapolis in a number of different places. So I've lived on the north side of Indianapolis, east side of Indianapolis. When I say east side, I've lived in Lawrence. I haven't lived in part of Indianapolis, the east side of Indianapolis, that actually does have a lot of violent crime. Not terribly far from it, but certainly in a nicer area. But that's another example, is that you can be relatively close to it, but still, that area is, for the most part, pretty safe. I lived on the northwest side of Indianapolis, and then when my wife and I met, she was living downtown Indianapolis, so I spent a ton of time down there. Well, it depends on the stage of life that you're in. Now that I've got a family, I've got a few kids, I'm probably not living downtown Indianapolis, but it's not for the safety, it's for a lot of other reasons. And there's probably other parts of Indianapolis that I may not want to live in, not necessarily for the safety, but for other reasons. Of course, geography and just the fact that that area may not necessarily be the best fit for you because it's not the right location. That's a big one. But safety is absolutely on everybody's mind, and it's on our mind now, even where we live. We want to ensure that we're living in a safe place. We're in a good school system that's safe. So Indy, I wouldn't take the reputation as it being a crime-ridden city as something that you're going to apply to the whole city, because it's not. It's not a crime-ridden city. Without a doubt, there are pockets, but you can find a lot of places in Indianapolis that are going to really be quite safe. So you just have to dissect it a little bit more than just throwing the whole thing under one particular ranking or one particular idea as to how it is. You got to be a lot more careful than that. All right, the second question I hear about Indianapolis, especially if you've never been to Indianapolis before, is there anything to do in Indianapolis for me? Well, if you're from a place like New York or Miami or Los Angeles, well, yeah, I mean, you're tripping over things to do. Really, in Indianapolis, you're kind of tripping over things to do here too. Now, this isn't a video about exactly what to do in Indianapolis, but if you want a few good sites, I got 3 good websites that you can check out for a lot of things to do. One of them would be visitindy.com. Another one's gonna be indywithkids.com. That one's actually great for families. So what you can do in Indianapolis with your kids, if you're living here or visiting here, and then do317.com. Unbelievable sites. They've got all that taken care of. I really can't get into all the exact things to do in the videos that I make. They do a much better job anyway as to summarizing what's going on. But there's an unbelievable number of things to do here. So you do have museums. Sports are really huge in Indianapolis. And I just passed, kind of going out of White River State Park here, and the zoo is just off to my west over here as I'm crossing the White River. You can see the big glass building over there. So over in that direction is the zoo. This is the NCAA. So NCAA's headquarters are here in Indianapolis. So obviously they get a lot of NCAA events, but we've got the Colts, we've got the Pacers, we've got the Fever, we've got a soccer team, we've got a hockey team, although they're not necessarily the highest level. They're like that AAA level for baseball. And then speaking of AAA baseball, we've got a AAA baseball team for the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Indianapolis Indians. I mean, sports, you can trip over a lot of sports in the city. And if you don't like sports, that's okay, because there's a lot of other things for you to do, including, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that music scene. The music scene here is really quite good. It's very intense. There's a lot of really great places to see a show. A couple right here in downtown Indianapolis you have Gainbridge Stadium, and that's where the Pacers actually play, and it used to be called Conseco. It used to be called a number of different things actually. Banker's Life was the previous name, so Gainbridge is actually for me kind of hard to say. And then you've got TCU Amphitheater, and then you've got all kinds of little places to go and see a show, and then you've got other places around Indianapolis and some of the other cities like Noblesville, which has one of the biggest music venues. It's a giant amphitheater at Ruoff. So a lot to do as far as that's concerned. But I actually had a pretty eye-opening, I guess, conversation with some friends not that long ago. And a friend of mine who's about my age, is in his 40s. And then another friend of ours who, she's in her 20s and single. And then another friend who's not from here, he's from the UK. And his son is from the UK and came over, and he's staying with him for a little while. And Indianapolis is the first place that he's ever been in the States, and loves it. Wants to move here, wants to stay here, and he's not yet 20. So you might not want to, because they were going to go to Chicago for the weekend, but you might not want to show him the whole country, because there's a lot of great places in the United States to live, a lot of cool spots. He may not want to live here where you live because he's young. And he said, yeah, I'll probably be careful with that, but he's pretty convinced he wants to live here. And then the 20-something, she chimed in and said, well, it's true, I'm 24 and I'd love to live somewhere else. And myself and the 40-something who have kids or married said, well, when you get a little bit older, a place like Miami or a place like New York, it kind of starts to lose its appeal, because it's a great place maybe, or an exciting place for singles. It's not necessarily the best place for someone in our position with kids, married, looking for good schools, looking for a quieter place, looking for safety, looking for just a slower pace than all of those. And my friend who's in his 40s said, well, when you get older, you might be surprised when you come back here as to exactly how great it is to live here. And it's true. So it just depends, I guess, on what stage of life you're in. But even if you're young, in my opinion, because I was young when I moved to Indianapolis, I was 22 years old, and I thought it was exciting enough. But I don't love New York City. I mean, I like to visit it, but I'm never gonna live there. I like to visit Miami and all the areas surrounding it, especially in like January, February, but not a place that I really want to call home. I don't want to live there. I prefer a place like this. It has enough nightlife. It has enough things to do as a single person, yet it's just a little slower pace and a little more calm than some of those other places. Another question I hear quite a bit is, what's the traffic like in Indianapolis? And that's a hard thing to define for sure, what the traffic is exactly like objectively, because it depends on where you're from. Now, where I'm from, a small city in southern Indiana, Evansville, Indiana, I mean, the traffic there really wasn't all that bad. But I come to Indianapolis and I feel like, well, the traffic is much, much worse. But I've been to a lot of different places in the world. I've been to certainly a lot of cities in the United States, like Los Angeles, Miami, New York. Those would be some of the ones that top in my mind, but I've also been to some countries in South America and some big cities there like Buenos Aires and Argentina. The traffic was really tough, really tough. And so when I look in Indianapolis and I think traffic here, we definitely have some hot spots. Like later today, I've got to go down on the southeast side of Indianapolis, on the southeast side of 465. And I know the traffic is going to be heavy. I know it's going to be moving, but it's going to frustrate me because it is heavy and it's just going so slow. Because we've got summer construction going on, and that's just actually a place where you do get a lot of traffic. And then on the northeast side, around the northeast corner of 465, once you get to the north side of Indianapolis towards Hamilton County, where Fishers and Carmel are, that tends to really back up quite a bit, and you get a lot of traffic through there. So you get your hot spots, and the reason for that is because you got a lot of people living in Marion County, you got a lot of people living in Hamilton County on the north side, and so it just bunches up. And it's the same on the south side. You got a lot of people living in Greenwood, south of Indianapolis, and of course in southern Indianapolis, so it bunches up quite a bit. And there's a major interstate down on the south side of I-65 and a major interstate going north, I-69. So that's just going to happen. But most of the time your traffic in Indianapolis really isn't going to slow you up all that much. You're talking a handful of minutes realistically. If you're watching your clock or your GPS, how much time is it going to add to a 20-minute drive? 3, 4, 5 minutes? I mean, really? It seems like forever, but it's really not that bad. Most of the time when you get into commutes around Indianapolis, it's just because it's the sheer distance. So if you were traveling, let's say from the airport, International Airport, going up to Noblesville, Indiana, depending on where, but if you're in far northeast Noblesville, that's just a lot of miles. So that's gonna take you some time. It's simple as that, because if you're traveling 30 miles or so and you run into a little traffic, yeah, it's gonna delay you some, but you're already looking at a 45, 50-minute drive. So what's another 5 minutes for the most part, just because the traffic is a little bit slow. There are times, of course, where you can get delayed more than that, or you can get delayed 15, 20 minutes, but it's usually not all that bad unless there's an accident of some kind. When the weather's bad, when we get snow, when we get sleet and just nasty road conditions, of course, that can add some time as well. But Indianapolis really does a good job with the roads. You might hear all kinds of other things, but realistically, in a city that only gets about 22, 23 inches of snow a year, and we get 6, 7, 8 inches at a time, yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a mess. But usually the major roads, the interstates, they're all clear pretty fast because we usually know when that snow's coming, so they can pre-treat the roads. And then if it's happening during the night, the Department of Transportation is working through the night. I mean, they work hard to clear as much as possible to avoid a lot of gridlock. So yes, you'll have periods of time where the traffic is bad, depending on individual factors. But as a whole, if you're coming from a place like Seattle or Los Angeles, New York, and you're used to driving, you really drive a lot, you would only drive here really a whole lot just out of mileage. It's probably going to be a relief for you. But if you're coming from a really small town or a small city somewhere in the United States, well, it's a bigger metro. So it may be a little bit more than what you're used to. We actually don't get a whole lot of snow, but that's not the question. People do ask, how much snow do you get? Well, a little over 20 inches a year. So most of the winter, it's not exactly like this. The leaves are gone, of course, and the grass isn't this green, but it's a little more brown and a little more stagnant looking, but bare, no snow on the ground. But people ask, what's there to do in the winter? So if you get into western cities in the winter, obviously you got the mountains, you got skiing, you got snowmobiling, snowshoeing, you got all the stuff that you can do outside in the winter. But here, we don't have mountains. Now we've got some pretty big hills in the south of Indiana, and actually probably pretty surprised if you've never been there, how beautiful it is, how wooded it is, and how hilly it is. And there's actually a couple places that you can ski and tube down there, but they're not dramatic. They're certainly not like the mountains or even in the Northeast if you get in the Adirondacks or something like that. But what is there to do in the winter here? Again, I would go back to those websites, the ones I gave you at the beginning, because they will update you on things to do all year long. But I will tell you, there are plenty of things to do here in the winter. Are you more limited as to what you can do outside? Of course. You are absolutely more limited because it's cold, it can be miserable, it can be wet, and you just don't want to be out in that all the time. Of course, you can still get out in it if you want to. People come out and they still bike and run and things like that in the winter. That's not unheard of at all. I still do some of those things as well. But honestly, spring, summer, fall, they are so busy with so many things, especially kids' activities, out for the summer, work really cranks up in spring, summer, fall, that the winter, I honestly look forward to some of it. I don't like all the winter, without a doubt. My wife certainly knows that. Once we hit February, mid-February and all that, I'm kind of over it at that point. I am really looking for some better weather. But when we get into November, December, January, kind of enjoy a lot of it. It's almost like it's part of the natural biorhythm that I've got, in that it gets darker earlier. That almost forces you to slow down some and not be in such a hurry, not overschedule yourself, not just feel like you're running on 3-4 hours of sleep all the time, because it gets dark so late here in the summer that usually don't even get to sleep until feels like 11 o'clock or a little after that sometimes, and then the sun comes up pretty early, and so do the kids. They get up early, so they're up early anyway. So I feel like you just get more sleep in the winter too, and just feel more rested. It feels just like a slower time, and I enjoy that. I like some time in the house when it's dark, because I feel like that's just relaxing. It's nice. And I don't want a monster schedule of things to do in the winter. Things slow down a little bit, I think, in the Midwest in the winter, and that's okay. So if it's not your thing and you have to have outdoor activities, well, you're gonna be more limited. You absolutely will. So you need to make sure you're doing your research on that, if that's gonna be something that you can handle. But indoor activities, yeah, there's still really plenty of them. Plenty. There's plenty of things that you can do yourself. There's plenty of things that you can do with your kids. There's plenty of things that you can do with the family. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but just understand it is a little bit slower in the winter. Now, this last question, it's kind of a subjective one, but I live in a place, of course, not in Indianapolis. I actually live in Greenfield right now. Lived in Fishers for a long time, for 16 years. And people always ask me, not always, but a lot of times, if we go to a particular location, well, why don't you live here? If you don't live here, then maybe I shouldn't live here. And I never want to influence anybody on where they should and shouldn't live. I'm only trying to help match you with what you like. And what I like may not be what you like. And so I work hard oftentimes to try to not influence people in that way. But of course I have my preferences. I absolutely do. And if we're getting specific about my preferences in Indianapolis, where would I live? Would I live downtown for one? Yes, but in a different season of my life. Definitely. I'm not going to do that now with the kids and everything that we do. It's not going to be the best fit for us. But some families, it absolutely could be with kids. There are a lot of families that live in the downtown area or near it with their kids, and they love it. It's just not for me, but I would love to live downtown. Again, in a different season of my life, I would. If you get a little north of downtown into some of the urban neighborhoods like Heron Morton, Old North Side, Fall Creek Place, I love those neighborhoods. I love their proximity to downtown. I love the feel, the maturity that they have. It's just a really cool vibe through there, but I also love Broad Ripple. I love Meridian Kessler. I love a lot of places across the north side, not even neighborhoods that you've probably heard of. For instance, one of them that I moved to first in Indianapolis back in the 90s in Nora. I love Nora. I love a lot of the homes through there. I like the maturity of it. I like the fact that the Monon Trail goes through there. It's close to so many different things that you're going to need. It's close to Carmel and all it has to offer, because it has a lot to offer. It's also close to Broad Ripple in Indianapolis. It's easy to get to downtown Indianapolis. It's just a really cool location. I really like that. And then across a lot of the cities around Indianapolis, obviously I've lived in Fishers. I would live in Fishers again, without a doubt. It just geographically doesn't work for us right now. I would live in Carmel. I would live in Westfield. I would live in Noblesville. I would live in Zionsville. I would live in Brownsburg. I would live in Avon. I would live in Plainfield. I would live in Greenwood. And then all kinds of other small towns that surround Indianapolis that I haven't even mentioned in this video, but I've done some videos about them on the channel, and you can check those out. That can be a good fit, but you ultimately have to choose a place to live that is going to be the best fit for you. And some of them might overlap as far as what they have to offer and how they can fit you, but then it comes down to geography, because you don't want to be driving 30, 40 miles a day for your commute or to go to a school or anything like that. So you want to make it a little bit convenient. So that's what it boils down to for us too. We're completely normal, and well, we want to drive as little as we possibly can and stay close to what we like. So that's where we've picked, although I would pick a lot of other places and more than what I've even mentioned in this video here in answering that question. But you have to determine for yourself what's going to be that best fit for you. And if you need help with that because you don't know Indianapolis, then absolutely reach out, because we're happy to chat with you about a lot of these things and not going to influence you into something that may not fit you. So that's why I want to stay away from my own preferences a lot of times, because we want to dial in what's going to be best for you. But a lot of people will ask me that. Where do you live and why don't you live there? And where would you live in Indianapolis? Now, if you have questions at all outside of the 5 that we've covered here in this video, make sure you reach out any way that you know how. And until the next one, we'll see you later.